Today we're going to look at how to put an armrest in a Mini Cooper. This is the F55, F56, F57 variety that has a specific center console that needs to be done in order to place in the armrest. So we're going to go from this to this. This is another Mini Cooper, but it also has the armrest installed. So I do have the ability to see what's going on between the two, and hopefully I can make this video show all the details necessary in order to attach an armrest to a console that doesn't have it yet. In doing some research, I've had to go and get the center console that actually has cutouts for the armrest. You can see them right here and right here. There's two specific spots that are cut out of the actual console to allow the armrest to sit in there. So along with this particular cover, which I bought online, and I'll put links in the description below, I have a tool for being able to do trim tool. It's plastic, so it doesn't damage any of the instruments and the cowling and all that kind of stuff. And then also I have a 13mm wrench, which I'll need to use the bolts, and I went out and bought some M8 by 1.25, and they're 25mm bolt here with washer, and then I have lock washers, or at least ferrule nut washers, flat flange bolt washers that'll be able to secure the armrest holder. So that is the armrest frame that needs to go in, and as we start working on this, hopefully that's going to be self-evident. Also purchased a couple of extra screws because I noticed that there was one screw that needed to happen in the center, and if you notice on the original one before I take it out, there is no screw hole in that area, mostly because it goes into that screw location centered on the holder. In addition to that, I purchased off of eBay a used armrest that is the official OEM armrest. Now this one actually has some of the extra components for charging phones and so forth. I'm not going to use that, so the wires will just dangle in the bottom, but I wasn't able to remove that from the armrest prior to the installation. But they'll come with or without them, so make sure you know whether you're going to be able to charge or not charge if you want to invest in that and get the wiring that's in the car, match the wiring that's in the car. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing that needs to happen is you got to remove the rear cup holder. And this is done by either screws or push pins that exist in this hole over here, and then one on the other side. So one of my models had a push pin type of scenario that came out real easy. This one actually had screws holding it in. There's an additional screw which is underneath the rubber cap that you can see the hole for. You just pick this up and it comes up. It's not glued in or anything. Just use your trim tool to pop that open, and then you can undo the screw. Once you've undone the screw, then this will just come right off, just like that. So that exposes the rear screw for the console, and I'm using a T20 star bit Torx, and that's all it is just to go in here and take that off. So again, I purchased some extra screws should I lose one or drop one or whatever. Okay, so that takes care of the rear of the console. So I'm going to reposition the seat here, and then I'll show you some of the components that need to be taken up in the front. Okay, so now we got to look at some of the components that are coming through this console that we need to remove. And you'll see the boot that's here. This is the boot that's for the emergency brake. It has two spring clips. One on that side and one on the other side, and then it has a little plastic tab over here. So what you do is you pull up on the side, and that will pop right off. If you need to, you can use the nylon trim tool to actually lift the front end of this. Remember, there's a tab in the back, so you want to take that and release that tab, So now that this boot can freely go down inside, or will go inside as this passes through when it comes off. Alright, the next thing is this particular grouping for this control panel here. And again, you just take your trim tool and you put it underneath, and then you just lift it. Just lifts up. I've already pre-loaded it or pre-taken it off, so but it's just a spring clip on one end and then a latch piece of plastic on the other end. So we can get that out of the way. Now we have two screws that we need to remove the electronics here, and we'll be disconnecting that pretty soon. But let me go move on to the gear shift real quick. So this is the gear shift knob. It's held in also by like 3 of those spring clips. So you just take your trim tool underneath and you just twist it and it'll pop off. Again, I've already preloaded that, so I've taken that off. Once that's off, you'll notice that there's a wire underneath, if I can get a picture of it. There we go. There's a wire underneath that you need to disconnect. So if you disconnect that wire just by pulling on it, you can disconnect that cable. Now you're ready to remove the gear shift. So what I've done is I put the gear shift in neutral. I don't think it matters in the position, but it just helped to be able to pull it straight up. And you put one hand down here and one hand on top, and you just pull really hard straight up. When you pull straight up, it will release underneath, and then this whole thing will come up on its own. So this is a manual. For the automatic, I've seen videos where people have removed it in a very similar fashion, but you have to, there's a little lever that's down by the side that you have to push and bring that into a neutral position so it's more centered on the stick, and then pull in the automatic button and then pull up with the same amount of force. It was fairly strong force that I had to pull off on that, but it actually came off pretty easily as well. Alright, so the next thing we have to do is we have to look at relieving the panels on the sides of this console. Because if you notice down here, the console comes down underneath this particular covering. So up in here, up in there, there's a screw, just one, and once that screw is removed, then you can grab that panel. See if I can get back far enough. You can grab the panel and then just pull, and the little spring tips. Now you'll know there's a wire back there connected to a light, so we don't want to damage that. So don't pull too hard. And there are also some tabs that are there that lock into slots in the back. And so now with this removed, I can now remove the one screw that's on this side, and I do the exact same thing on the other side, and I'll remove the screw. And the hole for the screw that we took off on this panel is right there. So you'll be able to see that without a problem. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is move back into the center console and then remove this button, and we'll do that in a second. Okay, I've removed the two screws. They're still same Torx 20 bits. Remove those two screws, and once I've done the two screws, there's a little clip up here which is just a soft latch, and you just pull on it a little bit and that will come off. Then we have a connector underneath here that we have to remove with wiring. So let me do that. And then there's another screw that's just below that that holds this console center in this location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off that wire and I'll reroute that. There's some holders for the wire down here. There's two of them. I'm going to take that off so that the wire can freely go around, and then I'm going to remove this screw. Alright, now this connector gave me a little bit of trouble, and I just had to pull it. So I just firmly grabbed it and then pulled it off, but you can pry it, so try to be careful because you can break the plastic or damage the connector a little bit, but you want to make sure, I mean, it did take some force to get it out. Alright, so we'll keep going. Okay, the screw is a T27. That's what it took to get it out. Now I've got that wire that I'm going to push back through the hole, and then the console should be able to come out in theory. And we'll see how that goes. If I hadn't mentioned before, once we take that cup holder out, there are 2 screws at the bottom that need to be removed as well. So I need to remove those, and then hopefully the console will be able to come out. So with the 2 screws out, you can easily just pick this up, and there are 2 little push pins, or the spring clips, that will hold that in. So I'm going to go ahead and wrestle this out, and I'll let you know if there's anything that's necessary. I have the emergency brake in the on position. I just have to push the boot through the console, and then everything else should come out fairly easy. I'll let you know if there's anything else that needs to be done. Alright, with the emergency boot pushed through, and it took a little bit of finesse, and again, the emergency brake needs to be in the fully engaged position. It makes it a little bit easier. But you can see how I pushed the boot through. And up at the front, I had to pull it away a little bit, because where you have screws, they have little indentations that try to get caught on stuff. So now I think this thing is ready to come out. So if I just grab it in the back and I pull on it, it should be able to come out. Alright, I'm going to put this down so we can wrestle this out. And there you go. So it came out. It did help to have the seats all the way back as well as you were lifting up, so that you had enough flexibility around the seat belt holders. But she's out, and you can see over here what it looks like. And everything looks to be identical. When setting the 2 side by side, everything's identical except for that little cutout. So I think in theory I could have just done a cutout on that to allow the armrest to reach through. But we got the part that the console, and we'll just put the other one up on eBay. I know there's some people that are trying to delete or remove their armrests. So this is kind of a video that will help them do that as well. Alright, so the next step is to start looking and preparing the inside with the bracket that we need to support the armrest, and getting that installed. So we'll check out and see what that needs to do, what needs to be done with that. Alright, so here's what it looks like with the armrest bracket is not there. So I was expecting it might be, but I suspected it also wouldn't be. That's why I purchased one. And we can see where it's going to mount. So the mounting holes for the armrest, there's one right here. There's one on the other side of this bracket. There's a front one up here which has a square of carpeting that will need to be removed. And then there's another one that's just on the other side of the emergency brake handle. And so we have nuts and bolts to fasten that bracket in there. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, in looking at the bracket, I see 2 holes lined up for the back ones. That's fine. But in the front, the two holes are offset. And so what it looks like, I need to place this on one of the brackets. There is a bolt that's coming up over here. You see that green bolt that's, maybe you can't see it right now. It's up front there, right in the center. But because they're offset, it looks like I need to use this front bolt here, this bolt over there, that's the emergency brake, and then the 2 back bolts there. So let me go ahead and put this in, and we'll see how it goes. Yes, and it fit nicely. So it just slipped right in there, and I've got it on the bolts. So now I'm going to apply the nuts. I only need one of the nuts that I actually purchased to go on this front hole here, because I've got a bolt or a nut for that one and these back 2. So I'm going to go ahead and install those, and I needed a longer extension because this bracket sticks up fairly high. Okay, little progress update. I've got 3 of the 4 in. I'm going to be putting the 4th one on, and I didn't mention, but I did have to pull that little piece of carpet, so I pulled that little carpet square out. It wasn't hard. I just used a hand, my fingers, and it came right out. Alright, so moving on to the 4th bolt. Okay, so here's the final bracket install. You'll see the bolt up front, both bolts in the back, and the other one up front. And I just set it on top of the brackets that are there. It fit nicely, and it's giving some space for the sensor of the emergency brake. So everything looks good. So now I'm going to grab the other console, and I'm going to start wrestling that back in, and then hopefully everything else is just reassembling. Alright, hold on a second and I'll get the console installed. Okay, so I've got the new one in place. Haven't screwed anything in yet. I was able to filter or bring the emergency boot up through the console, which helped. Separating the 2 seatbelt holders also helped, but you can see everything lines up for the armrest, and the holes are still in the right place. So now I'll be able to button things up and put some of this back together. So everything other than screws and putting things back together for the gear shift, all you have to do is push down really hard on it, and you'll feel it click into place once you have it lined up. I might film some of that, so we'll see what happens. Alright, I'm going to start putting this back together. Okay, progress update. I installed the screw back here, which goes into the armrest holder, and then I've secured most of the flashing, or most of the cowling and console up front, and I'll put those 2 pieces back. So now I got to put on the trim piece for the control knobs in the center, and that's pretty simple. It just has a little lip at the top that you just got to make sure you push down on the front of it. Once that's in, you just push on the back. And just like that, that's now in. Underneath the gear shift are the 3 locks that are used, and you'll see this little pin, little dowel that goes in the alignment hole right there. So you'll know how to put that in pretty easily. But let me get that, fish that wire up here and make the wire connection that goes on right there, and then I'll get back to putting the install of the gear shift. Okay, so I have the knob back on. I attached my wire. This isn't connected yet, but all you got to do is push down, just like that. And now that's nice and solid. But the gear shift is still not seated well. So to do that, all you do is you take it, line it up so that it's horizontal. And again, we're still in neutral. And then just push down. And you hear it click. And that's it. Now it's locked in. Won't move, won't transition, turn. That's all done. So now we're all buttoned up here. Now we got to get the armrest. So I'm going to move the seat forward and be able to work on the armrest. And once we get that installed, then everything else should fall into place. So first thing to note is this particular black piece that covers the joint for the armrest comes apart pretty easy. All you have to do is grab it on both sides and it should pop open. If you pull opposite, you'll see it split right down the middle. I'm going to do that and I'll show you in a minute how that all works out. So with the armrest in the up position, the part facing the front, you can pull that straight off. You'd have to lower the armrest again in order for it to take off this back piece. But both pieces need to be taken off so that you can reach the screw bolts, the bolt holes, and actually bolt this in. So I'm going to remove this and it just pulls off. If I get my armrest back in line, All you do is lift up on one side like that, and lift up on the other side, and boom, it comes off. Now I'm not going to do anything with the wires, like I said, that are in there, so I'm just going to let them dangle inside because I don't have any of the electronics that run that stuff in the back. You can get them without it. This just happened to be an eBay model, and it was the cheapest one that I could find. So you can get them at a junkyard without it. It's up to you. But again, I'm just not going to worry about the wires. So using the bolts that I purchased, the M8 1.25 by 25 millimeter bolts with washers, I was able to install the armrest in both ways, both connections. Now the other thing that I'm noticing, if you remember, we had screws that were on this back side of the cowling on the one that did not have the armrest. Those are now on the armrest holder and most likely are going right there. So we're going to have to use the two other screws that I purchased and screw them into the hole there to support it before we put the cup holder in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to put on the covering for this thing, and again it just slaps on the back and then snaps on the front. So just line all the tabs up and it'll go right into place. Alright, I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Okay, so I've got a screw here, got my screw here, and I got my other screw let's see if I can get it. Sorry. Anyways, it's in. Okay, so the next thing is to install the cup holder in the rear, and it just goes on those two slots, one over there in the front and one on the other side in the front. And then we have the screws that are necessary. Screw one there, screw one down there, and the other screw is right down there. And then that will conclude it, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. And that completes the job. So there we go, armrest installed, fully functioning, pulls back, pulls down, drops down, opens up, all the phone stuff, the wiring that I don't need, but that's still in there. But a functioning armrest with everything, and OEM mini parts, so that makes it even better. And the little rubber thing is back installed. All the rest of the console is installed, and everything is back to the way it was, except now we have an armrest. Hope you enjoyed the video.